This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptile. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
Hey guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal cast. Last week we tried to keep it short and sweet, and we did not. So this week we're actually going to do that. We've got a brief topic now that the dust has settled in a post-Stoneforge world for Modern. We are going to cover what is real, what is fake in terms of spikes,
yes,
and then what some of our expectations are going forward for the format, and financially what you can see with various pieces of equipment across the way.
Yeah.
So start it off then.
All right. So the first thing that happened when they unbanned Stoneforge Mystic was Stoneforge Mystic popped. And I think we saw both versions, GP promo and set, at 80 each, and then steadily tumble throughout Monday down to 60, and I honestly don't know where they are sitting now, but that is very much a real spike in the overall floor of the card in time, but initially the upfront price was fake. Nobody was paying over $300 for a set of Stoneforge Mystics within hours of the unban. $70 right now for a card that was printed in World Wake, has a GP promo within the last few years, and was also in
the
theme
deck.
Yeah. Grand Prix promos. The Judge promo's on here. Nice joke, bro.
Yeah, someone listed it for 5K, I think.
Oh, yeah. It has a price in the open market because one person somehow was able to list one of the 8 of these things that exist on TCG Player. So
yeah.
But yeah, this is a card that will command a brand new floor. I think it settles in long term in around 40 because we're still holding our breath on the fact that this won't wreck the format. It's going to follow Jace the Mind Sculptor, and the fact that it just shot up, and when it didn't crush the format, it'll settle back down to a real price. So resetting the floor and that spike is definitely true, but the release day hype was not, and it's going to be the same for every card that's unbanned. The next few cards on the list, however, their spikes are quite real. Next one on our list is Sword of Fire and Ice. That card is tantamount to the Stoneforge package for decks that already play hand disruption. Once you have somebody's hand under control, like in a Jund or Abzan or Mardu style shell, you need to start picking up your own form of advantage, and that's where Fire and Ice really ticks in. Feast and Famine is good, but if they're empty-handed, you're doing nothing with half of that trigger.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the Dark Steel, the Modern Masters 1, and the Judge promo, which took a little while to go because it already had a decent price on it. Those are all very real prices, and they're going to stay that way until that card gets reprinted. Because this is a Modern staple right now, this is a Legacy staple, and this is an EDH staple.
Yeah.
And
I think it'll be interesting to see. I think this may actually go up a little bit more still as well, because we still haven't settled into a non-Wurza Stoneforge list.
Correct.
And I think once we have it settled,
of
all of the cards on the rest of our real list, I think Fire and Ice has the most room to grow.
And it's for several reasons, I believe, because as well, the first is short printings in both actual sets, and I might be wrong about this. It might be Fifth Dawn, but I thought it was Dark Steel that was shorted from distro because of the water damage during housing. A good chunk of that set was actually destroyed while it was being housed before release. There was what do you call it in the insurance world? Act of God.
Yeah.
Basically. So Dark Steel is just in short supply in general because of that. Also a set that is technically in the modern era, but in the non-modern era of release quantity.
Yes.
Right. So I think scarcity is definitely going to play a part in this card, whether or not we see an additional release of it later on, because equipment doesn't necessarily ruin standard. We might see this come back, maybe not.
Yeah.
Next on the list is Sword of Feast and Famine. That is from Mirrodin Besieged, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And
Event deck.
and Judge promo.
Yes.
And this is a card that is definitely more on the modern era print run size. So it will continue to go up because it is a format staple in Legacy and EDH. And Modern right now it's played in the control decks because once you can kind of control the board or somebody's hand with your counter magic, making them discard and removing an additional spell from their hand while basically giving your lands vigilance is pretty much top tier in that deck. Yeah. So we're looking at the number one swords for both kind of controlling style archetypes there, mid-range versus hard control. The trigger on this is also really interesting. The green trigger, which is to untap all your lands. My expectation was actually that we would see an Abzan deck with a lot of creature lands that wanted to take advantage of the untap. Maybe something with Sylvan Advocate that could bump up your creature lands because a 5/5 Treetop Village is nothing to sneeze at. And Shambling Vent as a 2/5 with lifelink is pretty decent. So we might still see a little bit more coming out of this card with additional shells as people experiment and the modern format slows down by a half turn to a turn.
Yeah.
But I think we're kind of at its peak for the time being.
Agreed. I think that it's probably going to be the least played of the good swords. Just because, like, in Legacy, obviously it's absurd because you have Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordain, you have all these ways to generate card advantage. Modern just too often ends up as everyone's hellbent in top deck mode, and Feast and Famine is really bad there.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing is Death and Taxes is the deck in Legacy, and that relies on the card advantage coming off of Fire and Ice before it relies on the hand disadvantage of Feast and Famine, though it is still played in that deck of note. So it definitely still has a home in Legacy, just not the same kind of home that it does in Modern.
Yeah.
Next on our list and our trending of swords is Sword of the Meek. That is a card that had been popping for a while. And it popped with Stoneforge Mystic even harder because people immediately began playing Blue-White Urza. A handful of Star City players, not like employees of Star City players, but some of the teams, the players on the teams that play in their circuit, thought that was actually the worst version of that deck to play, and then proceeded to crush the next Modern event without Stoneforge Mystic in their deck compared to those that did. But what we saw this past weekend in Ghent is that one of the top 4 teams that was playing Urza actually was playing Blue-White Urza.
Yep.
So they could tutor up Sword, play fewer copies, go back to that style of 4-1 Foundries to Sword, or maybe 4-2. And Stoneforge lends itself to that deck a little more, and I believe they had a more controlling shell. The winning deck lists for the Grixis Urza list that did actually play Teferi 3 CMC.
Yeah.
They kind of splashed white for that, but this blue-white deck actually just got to play it natively. They didn't have to worry about Astrolabe tricks or fetching some weird snow basics here and there.
Yeah.
So Sword of the Meek is going to continue to kind of crush it in that deck. And until somebody figures out how to basically work around Urza and make them pay for dirtling for 50 minutes per round, that card is going to do nothing but keep going.
Spell Snare, kids. Spell Snare.
Look, I mean, I would love it if Burn was playable. Eidolon of the Great Reveal is a hell of a card, man.
Yeah, it is.
It can control that deck to a point, but the rest of the format just kind of dunks on Burn right now.
Yeah.
There's a good bit of exposition for Patrick Sullivan at Star City Syracuse this past weekend about Burn. You can go. It's somewhere in day 2, and you can go listen to him. He spells out very clearly why it's not great right now in Modern.
Yep.
But immediately, that deck is one that can take care of Urza. There was a decent amount of Black-Red X in the top 4 of Ghent in the form of Mardu, Death Shadow, and Jund.
Yes.
So you have a lot of in-hand control in the form of discard and targeted removal that can kind of take care of Urza, but that's, again, slows the format down and doesn't lend itself to a burn-based format, so you can still have Urza succeed as you rebuild that shell, because it's a fairly robust shell and it's very redundant.
Yeah.
So Sword of the Meek is going to continue to be a player in Modern. We're going to continue to see that card go. It's never coming back, and price-wise, until they reprint it.
Yeah, which I don't think they'll do.
I don't think so either. That card is just weird. There's a lot of text going on there. Now,
a whole lot.
The first of 2 pieces of living equipment on our list, Batterskull. This is a card that has seen a 1.5 printings, new Phyrexia, and a GP promo.
Yeah.
Right?
This is obviously real. It's the win con of choice for Stoneblade in Legacy. Mm-hmm. don't think there's any reason it shouldn't be in Modern as well.
Nope.
It beats Burn, which is Wurza's biggest problem.
Yeah.
It's just it's good.
It is. 100% of the decks that run Stoneforge Mystic right now in Modern run Batterskull. As far as I could tell, 100% of the decks that play Stoneforge Mystic always pick up Batterskull, including the blue-white Wurza deck.
Yeah.
There's one Batterskull, and I had to search real hard in the Channel Fireball list to find what else you were targeting. I actually didn't know it was a Wurza list to begin with when I was looking at the blue-white list. I just saw Stoneforge and some Tempo stuff, and I thought it was an Azor Stoneblade list.
Yeah.
Then I read, because reading's hard.
It's fundamental.
Yeah, found out it was a Wurza list. So that was good. And again, this is another card that's just not coming back. I actually bookmarked the Storm Scale for this conversation.
Huh. Yeah.
And I remember, Living Weapon is pretty high up in the Storm list, meaning we're most likely not going to see it come back.
No. I don't think we will. We may see it in like a Masters set or like MH2.
Yeah.
But I don't think this card's going to get a reprint outside of Masters, outside of a Commander, some supplemental product.
We'd have to go back to Mirrodin to see Living Weapon again, for the most part. Unless, for whatever reason, there's like some sword with legs kicking it on Eldraine. Like, something like that we might see. But I doubt we're going to get as many Living Weapons as we did on Phyrexia's, or sorry, Mirrodin.
Whatever it's called, yeah.
Yeah. Battleskull is not coming back. I believe the GP promo is still lagging behind the set version in terms of overall price. So this is a kind of a pick your poison or choose your own adventure. If you need to play it, go whichever one suits your fancy. But in the end, the set version should cost more than the GP version, because the GP version was a promo for an entire year.
Yeah.
I believe it was towards the end of that cycle. It was like Stoneforge, Batterskull, Gristlebrand, and Progenitus.
And Jit was there too.
Yeah, but that was earlier. Like literally
that
the
early.
last four or five.
Progenitus and Gristlebrand were the last two.
I felt like I was giving up Progenitus for like 18 months as a judge. Like,
it was awful.
So Batterskull should, if you're looking for an investment here, set should be the best one to move into, because set foils are gone.
Yeah.
And the GP promo has infinite stock. So.
Yep.
Now, moving on, we have some of our answer cards, or cards that we thought would get, or personally I thought would get a little better with this next one. And I was surprised that it spiked. Spellqueller. I thought we would see an Azor list or a Jeskai Flash list that involved Spellqueller, Resto Angel, Snapcaster, Mage, playing a kind of blue-white Delver style game, just tempo, and it would have been one of the first decks developed with Stoneforge Mystic where that was your only sorcery speed play, in essence. That has not happened necessarily, but people are toying with Spellqueller, I believe, in the Bant deck.
Yep.
And while it hasn't seen a bump immediately, the average price on Stoneforge Mystic has been climbing since...
Spellqueller.
Spellqueller, yes, since about September 5th, or average caught up to market, and they just are starting to invert after this past weekend.
It's also something that I think it already existed in an archetype.
Yes.
So there was no reason it shouldn't be worth more. Like, it was a good deck. Mm-hmm. It's an aggressive card, and I think that, like you said, it is one of the best answers for the deck and against the deck.
Yes.
Because it just hits what you need it to.
Yep. It's a 2/3 that costs 3, so it doesn't dodge any piece of removal unless you don't have Revolt for Fatal Push. It is extremely susceptible against everything in this format, but it is a counterspell that doesn't exile. Sorry, that doesn't counter much. Like not Abrupt Decay, there's something else. That is a destroy spell that works similar to Spellqueller, where you're not committing the same style of action. It just gets around that weird, can't be countered style thing. Cool, I'm not countering it, I'm exiling it.
Yeah.
And so you can get Abrupt Decay with Spellqueller kind of stuff. So this is a pretty good utilitarian card. It costs 6 right now. There's no reason why, if the Bant deck or an Azor deck doesn't come up, this isn't an $8 to $10 rare. Flash is fine, but the ability is kind of weird. Like, Remand isn't a hard counter, but we're not really going to see that card come back into Standard anytime soon. So seeing this card again, it's not tied to Innistrad. They could put this anywhere else they want to. Just play patterns weren't great. It's a super weird effect. Doubtful it's coming back, and if Spirits ever crops back up directly, this card's just not coming down.
Yeah.
So this
the interesting thing, though, sorry to interrupt.
No.
The foil has actually climbed since the Stoneforge unbanning. So it's interesting that we've seen movement on the pack foil version, but we haven't seen movement on the non-foil. So it typically you'll see the foil precede the non-foil. So it could be that this is going to pop before too long, just through market forces, and not necessarily like being in a deck. But I agree, like this, it is a card which clearly should be in one of the decks.
Yeah,
I would think.
If we did this podcast yesterday instead of watching football, we wouldn't have seen average take over market this morning. We would have just seen it kind of coast along and catch up. But because we did delay a little bit, we're able to see this. So this is a card that will, like, if you don't have them, you want them, you think this tempo deck is going to be the one you want to play, either Bant or Azor or Jeskai, then get in on this card now.
Yeah.
That's all I really have to say about that. And then I think this last card in the real spike section is more up your alley than it is mine.
Yes. Command. So, once upon a time, Jace was unbanned in Modern. And everyone was like, oh, we're going in on Jace. We're going in on all these cards that Jace runs. And my thought was, what answers Jace? Because that is going to see a spike as well. Command slides into Jund, which was already a tier 1 deck, thanks to Renin 6 and CZ Peasy. And it is a very concise answer to every aspect of Stoneforge. Hit your artifact, hit your Stoneforge. They can discard a card if they Stoneforge into just an artifact in hand.
Mm-hmm.
It just does everything you want against Stoneforge. And the decks it's good in, the decks it goes in, were already well positioned in the format.
Mm-hmm.
And they only got better because they were more able to answer what was seen for a little bit as the boogeyman of the format.
Yes.
Similar to a few months ago when Collective Brutality was a $15 to $20 card.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really efficient. It did everything you wanted. Command, which was already very well positioned, now definitely does every single thing you want.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's real.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the meta's going anywhere for a while to make that crash. I think this, $15 to $18 is the new absolute floor for this card.
Yeah.
$20 is where it should be. I think it'll be at $20 for the next indefinite.
Oh, yeah.
Unless something drastic happens, because not only does it answer Stoneforge, it answers Wurza.
Yes, that's what I wanted to mention too. Was that, like, I'm going to bring up the graph real quick, and the first time we see Stoneforge Mystic pop is on Monday, August. Not Stoneforge Mystic, sorry. K Command pop was Monday, August 26th. But that's the market price, not the average. The average just keeps going up and up and up, supporting the fact that this card is just going to keep going. But I think what we saw then, I was trying to figure it out, was the Mardu Shadow list start coming up, which plays K Command alongside Ranger of Eos, and it basically allows you to rebuy your entire deck. Yep. Now, with Jund coming back and having a decent game against the format, where you're no longer looking at at a deck that's like 51% against the majority of the field, you're creeping back up to that 55, 56% you need to actually be a real deck. Alongside Renin 6 being your new toy and Wurza being a deck that this card is an absolute house against, you're looking at a card that's just going to stick around in this format until the end of time.
Yeah.
It's going to take something new or some emergency banning before this card goes away, and it's just a good, clean card. Nothing about this is unfair. It doesn't break anything. It just keeps the format honest.
Yeah, that is the perfect word for it. Honest.
Yep.
Because it helps the fair decks against unfair decks and against card advantage. Mm-hmm. So it's just perfect.
Absolutely. I'm happy it's back, not because I have a bunch of them, because I knew this card would be good, but because when cards like this are good, that means the format is a little slower. It needs to be where WotC wants it, so the format kind of plays a little better, so there's a little more back and forth. I don't mind it being a turn 3 format, as long as the control decks or the mid-range decks can get a footing in those first few turns, but when they can't, and cards like K Command and Collective Brutality can't be used to slow the game, they're only used to advance the game plan of a deck like Death Shadow, then I don't think Modern's in a place where we really want it to be. But
agreed.
So for our real spikes, K Command rounds it out. Now moving on to our fake spikes, the first one I want to talk about is Sword of War and Peace.
Garbage. Card's
Absolutely garbage. Now, it's not because the protections are irrelevant in Modern. Protection against red and white is really good. Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, hell of a card. Both of them. All of them. Wear and Tear. All.
Yeah.
Wear and Tear still gets the sword, but it doesn't get your artifact ding dong on the other side of it. Relevant protections. Yeah. What is now completely irrelevant is the red trigger. When this card was originally printed, the red trigger you could just spew off anywhere. It was one of those little bits of verbiage that got cleaned up not too long ago and no longer allows you to do damage to any source. Because it said player previously, you could redirect to planeswalkers and kill a planeswalker. Thus, when we went through that verbiage update, it stays at player. So you can no longer hit the player and get the planeswalker.
Yep.
This card has lost all value in regards to playability. It's still good in EDH because you play all the equipment you can in EDH, but this is not a card that's going to see play. It has the set printing, and just like all the other swords, it has the invention. But that's it. There's nothing floating this card outside of EDH playability right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything more to add to this. I think it's...
No, that's pretty much it. It's garbage. It's bad, and it should feel bad.
Agreed. The last sword on our list is not Body in Mind because that didn't make the list at all.
Card's bad.
It's good in cube.
Yes, in cube.
It's
True.
the only sword I don't play in my cube because of how good it is. I would rather get decked by Ulamog than that sword.
That's fair. You have to design around Ulamog. War and Peace, or Body of Mind just goes in every cube deck ever.
And that's the problem. Exactly.
Yeah.
So Body of Mind not here. However, our other Darksteel sword is Light and Shadow.
Yeah.
Light and Shadow saw the Darksteel printing. It saw the Modern Masters 1 printing and an event deck printing? Or no?
No, it was Judge Promo and Masterpiece.
Yep. Okay. So just a set print in Modern and Modern Masters.
Yep.
Now, this is a sword that looked like it was going to pop. On the first Star City event, in the first few rounds, we saw it do a little bit of work in the Bant deck, in the Bant Flasher, Bant Snow deck, whatever you want to call it. The dirtiest thing on camera in the first 5 rounds.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a snafu with Giver of Runes giving protection.
Yeah, to something with a sword that it couldn't have
colors
given
protection against
from.
something with a sword, so the sword should have fallen off and blah, blah, blah. The sword is still powerful, but the problem is it wasn't powerful enough.
Yeah.
The sword didn't do anything. That deck just spun its wheels and dirtled. If we had done the cast when we originally wanted to, we would have put this card on the real list because it was just, we thought it was going. People have been talking about it all week. It was finally putting up results. I delayed this cast, and now we have results from Ghent with that same deck. No Light and Shadow in that deck.
Yep.
Light and Shadow is just a bygone relic of 2 weeks ago. That's it.
Time's fast.
Exactly.
Deal with it.
The price spike on this card thus is false, but the truth about it is a new floor.
Yeah.
The price went up, but because this is still a Darksteel sword that has only seen the Modern Masters printing, the Judge Promo, and the Invention, you're going to have a price based on scarcity again.
Yeah. Which I think is the $45 to $50 range rather than the $30 to $35.
Yeah. It and War and Peace should basically fight for like the bottom 2 slots out of all 7 swords that we have currently. Sinew and Steel and Truth, whatever the blue one.
Yeah, it's a sword and sword.
Yeah.
Or Sinew and sword. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. War and Peace and Light and Shadow should be fighting for the bottom slot out of all 7 swords that we have right now. It's not great. Like white and black are relevant protections for Modern, yes.
The most relevant.
Yep, but both halves of the trigger are just not good. No.
Yeah, they're the only one that's remotely relevant is gain 3 life against burn.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I don't want to board in against burn? A 5 mana sorcery.
Yeah.
That gains life if I connect. That's just bad.
Correct. I think had the person that played this deck at the first Star City tested a little more with the other swords, they would have found out what the person from Ghent did, which is I believe they were playing Fire and Ice, which seems correct in a deck just full of like 1 to 3 CMC creatures. You just need to churn through your deck as quickly as possible, and you have your relevant recursion on Ranger Captain. But outside of it, that's that. Or not recursion, the silence. Just because you can't rebuy it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So that'll round out the swords. I don't think Sinu and Steel and Blue and White are relevant right now for Modern. If we see that Azor deck, Stoneblade or Spirits, we might see the Blue-White sword because the +1/+1 counters and then Proliferate ends the game really quickly. So it allows you to play this interesting game of minimizing the amount of creatures you get to play and play more like Lord-style effects, much like Merfolk. But I don't think we're in a place right now for either of those swords, and they're steady EDH players 100%, but they're not going to go up because of Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah. I do have one more for the False Spike.
Okay.
And that is, unfortunately, guys, I'm sorry. Manriki Gusari. That was a meme. I was right about that. It's not real. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the people who came out to Star City Dallas and bought a bunch of copies for $3 each from me. You guys are the real heroes.
Yeah, they're the MVPs. I still have I wasn't joking about the 2011 Legacy deck. I still have my Manriki Gusari for Legacy.
Yeah, I will say this: the foils went from 8 to 20, and I think 20 is a real price for that foil. So thanks to everyone for that too.
Yeah, I think at least the foil price should stay because equipment is huge in EDH, and it's a convenient way to just 187 equipment in that format. When I played it in Legacy, I played it in a slower Stoneforge Mystic deck, and it was basically there just to take out Jite.
Yeah.
So without Jite in Modern, you don't really have to worry about that kind of play, that counterplay. So this last section that we were going to get into is something that I added to the list after we talked about doing the cast initially, and this is expectations.
Yes.
Cards that didn't spike, but either you or I expected some movement on them.
Yeah.
The first one on the list is one I actually thought to check on a couple days ago, and it's Basilisk Collar. We first saw that card pop up when Eldrazi-tron was coming up because you could just slap it on a Walking Ballista and mow down a board and win the game from there with a bunch of middling and mopey Eldrazi. Yep. I thought we might have seen something similar. I wasn't sure exactly how people were going to work Stoneforge Mystic into the format, but it tutors more than just swords and batter skulls. It gets any piece of equipment. And Basilisk Collar does have relevant text on it for any creature that can just ping. It seemed relevant. I didn't move in on any of them, but it's just one of those things I wanted to keep an eye on. It was an expectation I had that somebody somewhere would have dirtled around a little bit and figured something out.
Yeah.
I believe Basilisk Collar has actually trended up recently, but not because of any modern play. It's just a decent card. It was reprinted, so it kind of bubbles it back up into the casual eye. Lifelink and Death Touch are relevant and Commander. Yeah, like people do dumb things. Gaining life, it just keeps you around. Like it's not just a +3/0 and trample and locks on Warhammer that makes that card a format stable.
Yeah.
So
it has value outside of that.
Yeah. So I expected it to gain. It didn't, and I can't feel sorry or happy about it either way. I'm just kind of not disappointed, just surprised.
Yeah. The interesting thing that I noticed after we started looking over these lists is that you can actually get foils of each version for non-foil market on TCG right now, which seems incorrect. So there's an opportunity there because, again, not due to any modern play, just due to EDH casuals. Like, this card's really good.
Yeah.
And it's been growing steadily. And not that I think, you're gonna wake up and suddenly it doubles in value, but maybe someone like that Selesnya Tron list we saw that we mentioned a couple weeks ago, if somebody finds some way to break that with Stoneforge and all of a sudden you've got... Yeah. You've got that with Stoneforge and Basilisk, and it does well, maybe, someone gets FOMO and spikes it, and you can exploit a buy list somewhere.
Yeah, speaking to Eldrazi lists, they're always a little tricky in what they want to do, because your entire threat base, generally speaking, is colorless, so it lends itself to being a little creative in what they want to do. Everything costs somewhere between, 3 and 5, and there's a lot that goes into that space. And despite the fact that you don't have Tron in the Selesnya Eldrazi deck, or the red green Eldrazi deck, that doesn't mean that a card like Hangerback Walker or Walking Ballista don't fit. Something that can just pick up Basilisk Collar and be effective with it, even if it dies.
Even Endbringer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Card's great with that.
It might just be something to keep your eye on. Like I said, I was surprised that it didn't hit.
Yeah.
A quick one was a Mortar Pod. Not because it works with Basilisk Collar, but it's a piece of equipment that people always forget exists. When they do, it usually crops up into something weird, and there were just kind of murmurs about it. So I didn't know what people were doing. I just had expectations that somebody somewhere would have done something. We would have seen the tokens list just mow somebody over with Mortar Pod, and that just didn't happen.
Yeah. That was one that I kind of expected someone to mention somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can tutor this up and just like pew pew shoot stuff, but I can't say I'm surprised I didn't see it, but I also would not have been surprised if someone did say something about it.
Yeah, it's like Grinding Station combos oddly with things, and Mortar Pod is kind of like Grinding Station but more mana intensive. So somebody's gonna make some weird Dr. Seuss Rube Goldberg machine at some point, and Mortar Pod may be part of it. It might not, but it would fit there. And then the last card on our list overall is Mystic Forge. I expected that card to tank after the banning in Vintage, but what happened, interestingly, was in Legacy, somebody built effectively Mystic Forge combo, and I wish I could explain it to you as well as Ari Lax did in his metagame breakdown, or deck tech rather, at the Star City Open this past weekend, but I cannot. It's basically...
Watch it. It's great.
It's a lot of Mono Rocks, Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith, Thran Dynamo, Mystic Forge, and you... with the 4 CMC Karn Lock, and you can basically make infinite mana. There's no Metal Worker and no Staff of Domination. But there is Paradox Engine.
Yeah.
So it uses like the EDH greatest list of mana ramp and then combo engines to just make an infinitely large Walking Ballista and ping people out of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the price spike on Mystic Forge, it actually, they invert yesterday. When he did his deck tech, it just gone. So with a new mud deck floating around that isn't control, it's combo, and it takes a while to get used to. That means there's refinements that can be made, and maybe this actually does become a decent piece of the metagame.
Yeah. So
my expectation was to tank. I was delightfully surprised when it actually has just kind of gone up. It didn't. Mystic Forge has not stopped.
No.
The end.
Nor will it.
No. This is going to be an EDH player. Right now, it's a Legacy player. We know it's in Vintage, right? So all we're missing at that point is Modern. If it hits Modern, then the card doubles, and that's it. So.
Hooray!
Exactly. So that rounds out the list of real spikes, fake spikes, and expectations coming out of the ban list.
Which hopefully kept it short and sweet. And yes, moving on to picks.
Yeah. All right, I want you to go to first on this one.
Okay, so this could also go in the expectations column of today's episode. I am going for Mask of Memory foils. Mm-hmm. So it is like outside of the swords, like god tier good equipment in EDH. Colorless filtering that also has card advantage and can be abused with graveyard strategies. Obviously interacts with Stoneforge Mystic from the first Modern Era set, which doesn't exist really.
No.
And the foils are sub $10.
Yes.
Now, waiting a day actually let us see the market and average inverse since yesterday.
Oh yeah.
So now you're seeing and we put it in our Discord Friday, and you're starting to see a little bit of movement. Those are not related by any means, as far as I know. But this card is not going to see a reprint. It's just not. Well,
in foil,
it might.
At least.
Yeah, in foil, it will not see a reprint. We saw a reprint in Commander.
Yes.
Additionally, you can get into the fringe stuff like Border, blah, 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 whatever. I just don't think an equipment like this is, in a limited format, the kind of impact they would want to print in a Modern set or in a Masters set. Generic card advantage, yes.
Yeah.
Something like this, no, because it can lead to stuff they didn't see happening. I just think it's long term. It's been steadily climbing. The listings have been getting lower and lower and lower, so that now we actually only have 11 listings total for foil on TCG, counting damaged foils.
Okay.
So the quantity has been slowly dwindling. It looks like there's a couple listings for sub $6 for foils still. So like there's no reason this card should not be like a $10 to $15 at minimum foil. And I could even see it getting to the point where it's like a $10 Card Kingdom buy list.
Yep. So this was in Commander 2014. That's the monocolor commanders for anybody that's interested. This is a card that I've played before, and we were talking before the cast, in red-white equipment.
Yeah.
Because that, aside from a number of cards that tutor up equipment, this is the only way to really just continuously draw on a very hard to interact with permanent.
Yeah.
You know, it's better than a rummage, but this adds no stats to your creature, so it doesn't really play the kind of game that WotC wants us playing right now. And when we live in a world where creatures, like I said last week, have 2, 3, 4 abilities, tacking on more than just some stats or an evergreen keyword is a little much. So it's doubtful that we see this card again in Standard. And I hate to say it, seems a little too lacking for a Masters set reprint. So the next time we would see this would be another Commander set. And those are limited releases, and this is, what happens. This card just goes up because eventually people find it. You got a deep dive gatherer to find this thing. Unless you played back in Myriad and Block and you still have a draft chef.
Yeah. And then you probably have oodles of it sitting around in a bulk box somewhere.
Yeah, because you could not really play equipment like that in Myriad and Draft.
No.
Electrostatic Bolt was a hell of a card.
It was. Great.
So, I like this. Like I said, I played this card and I forgot about it until you mentioned it, but as soon as you said it, I knew exactly what it was, and I knew how powerful it was. So this is definitely an interesting pick that I can get behind. My pick for the week is a little less obscure. I'm going with a rotating rare from Dominaria in Ariel, Knight of Windgrace.
Yeah.
This is one of 2 rotating rares, Knight related, that have gone up in price since the announcement of all the Knight Tribal cards. And the Ariel is the black-white Knight that makes additional Knights for her white activation, and for the black activation, tap X, untap Knights you control, destroy target creature with power X or less.
Pretty good.
So, yeah, this is the card that's stayed pretty low and really has only seen a bump since the Knight Tribal stuff. The reason I like this is because this is a very low investment card. We see the market right now is 46 cents. That is, right now, 10 cents more than I got in on last week when I announced this pick. I got somewhere around 40 or 50 for about 36 cents. So this is a card that has gone up market-wise in the past few days. It is also, of the 2, the cheaper option and the more relevant card. Yeah. Valiant Knight is the other Knight, and it is effectively just a Lord, which isn't bad in and of itself, but in a deck where you need your creatures to do a little more because you're going to be making some vanilla, a lot of vanilla tokens, putting them to work for you is going to be the way to go. And there are a lot of other Knights that do that. They have already spiked.
Yeah.
So I had a list put together of like 8 or 10 relevant Knights, including things like Phyrexian Crusader. Yeah. Which is a Knight, and I forgot about. That has gone up.
Pure Steel Paladin.
Yeah, both of those. And both of those can end a game very quickly. Pure Steel Paladin just lets you chain through with your draws. And Phyrexian Crusader is what you put all that equipment on just to knock somebody out. But when you need to play this middling game and survive a little bit, Ariel's one of your better options. I believe in this card more than some of the other ones, like Student of Warfare. That just is not a vanilla creature. Yeah, that's all it is. It just gets big and has double strike. Okie dokie. But Ariel, aside from not having haste, is impactful to turn you on tap with it because you can start 1/8/7ing other creatures on the board and you can start pumping out more tokens. So this is a relevant card in the relevant colors. If you go by the Mardu legend that they kind of ham-fistedly gave us. Prior to that, it was Edgar Markov was your Mardu Knight. If you wanted
Yeah.
legitimately a Mardu Lord. If you just want to play the black-white version, this is also a really good commander for that because it only costs 4 and is extremely relevant once you can untap with it or give it a pair of boots.
Yeah.
And it just has a ton of playability, and the entry cost is also really low right now because we're heading into rotation. These should be easy to pick up either off of a vendor site or out of binders. Because anybody who just plays standard or not EDH essentially should just dump these, and even at
Take
market, even at market of 50 cents, it should be fine.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned Valiant Knight, and I think that is kind of a trap because traditionally tribal decks like this are vulnerable to board wipes.
Mm-hmm.
So Knight Exemplar to me is the better Lord because it gives all your Knights indestructible, which is way more relevant than the +1/+1 and pay extra to give them double strike. So of the now rotating cards in Standard, I think by far and away, this is the better pick of the two. It's also the type of thing that, like, sure, I guess we could see it printed in a Commander set at some point as a non-foil, but I think seeing that only stands to gain the card value because it gets more eyes on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think right now it's hot. It's going to move because of the Knight Tribal stuff. You're going to have to wait for Eldraine to release to see this card really start to uptick. But it's just interesting how it is one of 2 cards that are just super casual, that are trending up as we head to rotation in literally 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that kind of clues us in that people are moving on this card to some degree. Card Kingdom's only buying 9, but Dominaria's been out for almost 18 months right now. And it's a regular rare. So the entire time they're cracking this and nobody's buying this card, they're just sitting on oodles of them. It's not a great indicator of really what's going on with this. You have to look towards graphs like stocks and put a little more faith in them than you might want to. But it's a casual card that had no demand really up until this week, and now we're starting to see it move. And we didn't see it like totally jackknife, so we're not seeing speculators move this. We're seeing players actually move this card, and that's what I like to see when I take some of this low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Because if it's the players moving it, it's much more likely to stick.
Exactly.
Which is, a topic for another episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a solid pick, and like I said, of the rotating Knights, I think by far and away it's the best one.
Thank you. But that's it for this week, guys.
Yeah, that's keeping it easy.
Yep. Next week will be our announcement of who wins the C19 box. Basically, we will be freezing those as late in the day on Sunday as we can stand it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't entered between now and then, please do so. We'll be throwing out some extra reminders on Twitter.
Yep.
The UMA giveaway is still going strong.
Yeah.
So, as we're cranking along on patrons, we're getting closer and closer to that giveaway. So if you're thinking about it, do it. Just jump in.
Yeah.
Relevant conversation in the Discord all weekend as the Legacy event was ticking along. I was doing my research on Knights randomly last week, so that was a fun.
Throwing that in every now and then.
Yeah, that was a fun little bit of conversation to have. But we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. I am at Halt I Am Reptar on Twitter. You are?
I am at Thirsty Sizzler on the Twitter.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. See ya.